Okay. Today I want to edit this photo, and I'm going to take you along with me. I'm going to start by resetting it to the basic, but only after creating a snapshot. This is what I'm going to call 2025-11 initial edit. Went with 2025-11 because that is when I shot it. I don't remember when I edited it. I'm gonna reset. This is the photo from the raw state. And we're just gonna start with some basics. If you're unfamiliar with Lightroom, if you're new to Lightroom, it typically works in a left to right, top to bottom fashion. So over here on the far right, we have the adjustments you can make, the cropping, the removal tool, red eye removal, and masking. Adobe generally expects users to go from left to right through those tools, top to bottom. So mostly going to be sticking to that. First thing we're going to do is we are going to pick a camera profile. I shot this on a Fujifilm GFX 100S2, so we have all the accompanying film simulations to go with it, and I'm just going to kind of hover over them to see which one I like for this photo. The initial edit I did was black and white, but I want to go color right now. And you know what? We are going to stick with Real Ace. All right, so I started with auto exposure settings and auto white balance. A lot of the times that can get you 90% of the way there. It can be a good starting point. If you have a particular vision or idea in mind, you might just start with messing with the sliders, but I'm just kind of winging it right now. So we are going to start with auto. And since I don't have a particular vision at the moment for this photo, it's mostly going to come down to just rocking some of these sliders back and forth to see what details are brought out and what details are obscured and which ones I want to focus on. So at the moment, I think I kind of want to go with a high key edit, which would mean slightly brighter highlights and probably bringing the shadows up because I want to reveal the shadows there in that midground. I want to reveal what the shadows are trying to hide in that midground. Now the whites can really affect your exposure globally, the perception of brightness. I usually end up leaving them pretty close to where auto puts them. And blacks, I typically have a habit of bringing them up rather than down. And then I'm going to reset vibrance and saturation. This presence section I'm just not going to touch because I typically like to affect the texture, the clarity, any notion of haze in an image, and the colors on a more granular basis using some of the other tools in Lightroom. Now for the tone curve, honestly I just kind of place some points here randomly. So some of these points I adjust, some of them I use as anchor points so it's not adjusting the tonality too much elsewhere in the image. I want it to have a wee bit of a washed out look, so I'm gonna lift the very far blacks a little bit, but I also want to reintroduce some of that contrast. So I'm gonna bring that band just a wee bit down. And since this is gonna be, as I affectionately called it, a high key edit, I am going to boost the highs just a wee bit more. I'm not super worried about detail in those clouds. Moving on to the color mixer. Now, one of the things I struggle with the color mixer is I can't always gauge what Lightroom is going to say red is red and what is aqua or blue. One thing you can do is you can hold down your option key, I think it might be Alt on Windows, and you can see which pixels it wants to impact. And there's very little red in here, just a little bit there in kind of the mid-right. Gonna go with a much more redder red. Let's see. These oranges, there's a lot of them there in the mid-ground, in the trees, and what's left in that field. Last time I was here, November 2024, no, September 2024, this field was a cornfield and I couldn't really see past it. It was late November, so I'm gonna go with a little browner on the leaves. And I'm certainly going to take out some of this yellow and the green. I want the greens that are I'm ultimately going to desaturate them. Now I'm going to hold that option key again and see, yep, no aquas. Going to hold that option key again, see where the blues are. Of course they are in the sky, and then they're a little bit in the shadows and in the mid-ground. I'm just going to boost the blue just a little bit. So while I rock some of these back and forth, just kind of like a quick little explainer on the hue, saturation, and luminance sliders. The hue is telling you how much of a color is a color, so how much red is red, or is it red-orange? Aqua, is it very teal? Is it very light blue? Blue, is it closer to teal or turquoise, or is it closer to like a violet? That is what those sliders are doing. When you get down to saturation, you're just telling it how, for lack of a better word, how saturated those colors are. How much of those colors exist. So one thing we could do with these sliders is just take them all to 0 and we'd have a monochrome image. I don't want a monochrome sky, but I do want to reduce it a little. And because the clear subject of these are the trees and that mid-ground line of houses, I'm just gonna make those sections a wee bit brighter. I'm gonna bring these greens down just to de-emphasize them a little bit. And I'm gonna bring the blues up. And you can see it's affecting some of that mid-ground stuff, but I'm gonna bring the blues up to keep with that high key. Popping over to color grading. This is where it is really helpful to bust out sometimes a color wheel and really leverage that color theory. You can really affect the mood and the tonality of a photograph with the color grading section. But I will go basic with cool shadows and warmer highlights. So one of the things you can do is you can look at, hey, my highlights, a lot of them are up here in the blues. You could look for a color that would play well with those blues. So something over here on the color wheel, something over here on the color wheel. But then you also have to think, how is it going to interact with some of the other bright parts of the image? Color grading's hard. It really is. So we'll just keep it warm and basic. Boost the luminance there a little bit. And I'm going to shift the balance a little bit to the highs. Jump down to detail. And I'm just going to turn denoise on because it is just so good now, the AI denoise in Lightroom, that I almost just turned it on by default. As best I can tell from every photo I've ever put it on, it does not appreciably alter it except for removing noise. So while it does that, time for a sip of water. Life-saving water. Hey, look at that. It's done denoising. So I'm going to zoom in to the part of this that I care about, this central section. And I generally have some standard settings I like to go to, general areas I like to go to for sharpening. So the amount is going to tell it how much to sharpen. The radius does a thing. It's something or other about the very low individual pixel level. Let's see how far in we can go. 800%. And let's see what that radius dial does. So if I remember correctly, the radius is setting the degree of distance it sharpens against neighboring pixels. So a negative radius would bring it into the side of the pixel, a positive radius move it outside the pixel. I've been told before, I don't know why, to use a negative radius below 1 on a landscape image, but on these GFX files, I've generally found I like it better around 1.2. And I suspect that with the compression of YouTube, it's not going to be the most obvious thing that you can see, because this is typically the view you'd want 100% in when you're doing sharpening. It's a very subtle change, and I've generally found that I like around 1.1, 1.2. Now, detail is the level at which it is going to apply it. Is it going to look for more broader macro edges in the image to sharpen, or is it going to get really, really down there? The higher the detail number, the more it'll sharpen. The lower, the less. And 25 is a good baseline. Now masking, if you hold down that option key, you will see black is where it is not applying sharpening, white is where it is applying sharpening. This is where I like to take a little more global view to see to what it is sharpening, because nobody who sees this image is going to come in here and try to look and identify individual leaves or quite see what's going on in the details of these houses. Most people, 99% of the time, are going to take a macro look at the photo, so we can really mask a whole lot of this out. Lens correction is applied by default. Transform usually gets it right. And I usually walk back and forth between auto and full to see which one I like bestest. Effects, a lot of times I will put on a negative vignette, a very slight one. The beautiful thing about a negative vignette, just the slightest post-crop vignette is, you know, we're talking like -15 with a whole lot of feathering. It will help draw the eye in to what you want people to care about. It doesn't have as much control as, say, doing a radial mask to really focus in and put that vignette to point a viewer's eye to a thing. In this case, we have a mostly center composition, so it'll work out fine because I want people to look at that tree. Calibration, this is another area where you can get to work on some tonality, the color tonality of the image. I'm not going to worry about it right now. But what I will worry about is the crop. I want this to be dead center as you can be on something that is as imperfect as a tree. And when I say dead center, I just mean that vertical line there and that crosshair. If I press Shift O, no, O, yeah, not Shift O. Shift O changes, just flips it around. O will cycle through these grid overlays. The next thing I want to look at is aspect ratio. And what is Instagram's aspect ratio for landscape? Aspect ratio landscape. .9 to 1, so it's almost 2 to 1. So let's do a custom aspect ratio of 1.9 to 1. Hey, look at that. Now this is where some creative decisions will have to be made. Do I want less sky and more field, or do I want more sky and less field? I think I will go with this direction. You know what? Let's put the trunk dead center. And I'll go with that for now. So bring up the crop tool, press R. Now this edit is fine. It will stand on its own with just these basic adjustments. Where Lightroom can get really powerful is its masking tools. And I really like some of their subject detection masks. It's not always the best, but they've been getting a lot better. If you're doing portrait work, the the people selection thing right here, real good. The landscape one is a fairly recent one, and it is getting better, but as you can see in the sky, it is trying to select things that are not the sky. It's mostly selecting the architecture in the image. It's missing some things, but it is a fairly complex scene. Vegetation, it's getting pretty close. But I'm not happy with any of those, so we will go with a radial gradient, and we'll start just right here in the middle. And what we're going to do is we're just going to bump that exposure up by 1/10 of a stop. And then we're going to come down here to Effects, apply the slightest amount of texture and clarity. And then we are going to add some linear gradients, one for the sky. I'm holding Shift down as I drag it down, and that's just going to keep it level. Now what I'm going to do is, since I have the sky with a linear gradient, a graduated gradient, anyways, I'm going to hold down, no, I'm not going to, I'm just going to come in here to subtract, select landscape, and I'm going to tell it to subtract the vegetation because it did do a pretty good job of selecting the vegetation. And that's doing pretty good on the sky. Since I said I wanted this, actually said I wanted it to be a high key edit, so we'll just leave it as is. I'm gonna come up here, boost up the highlights, bring up the shadows, and I'm gonna skip the color section, go to point color, and I'm gonna select this blue up here. Because I want to increase the range, increase the variance, and I'm gonna boost, apparently not the luminance, because that is really messing with those clouds. Then I'm going to select another blue way up here. Same thing, maximize the range. Going to leave the variance alone. Ooh, it is really messing with those clouds. I am not going to do this spot color. Going to leave that one alone. Going to add another linear gradient. And I'm going to intersect this one using the color range mask. You hold down Option on your keyboard when you go to add a new mask, and that'll help you create an intersecting mask. And the intersecting mask is going to look at the mask you already have, then using that apply the new mask only to, I don't know how to describe it, you're literally intersecting the masks. It's very powerful. I wish it was available on mobile. Wrong range. I wanted color range. I'm just going to select the color of the clouds. And gonna boost the range on that a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to Effects, and I'm going to Detexture and Declarity that. But no negative dehaze. All right, I'm going to add another linear gradient coming from the bottom. This one is going to be for this field right here. Bam. I held Shift again to keep it level. And this is going to be an area where I drop the exposure just a tad. So much of working with a photo in post is just about rocking sliders back and forth to get a taste of it, to get a taste of what you want out of it. I'm going to come to the color, and I'm just going to globally desaturate it, but only a little bit. All right. Next, I'm going to add another linear gradient, and I'm just going to drag it down right here. Holding shift again so it's straight. And then I'm going to subtract a linear gradient, and this is going to take some tinkering to figure out how to get it to behave. Because I just want a kind of a band, a gradient band there in the middle. Come back to tone with the shadows. Drop the blacks. Boost the highlights. And we will see about just warming that band up a little bit. Right there. So, kind of the one thing that is irritating me about this image, and the reason I wanted to crop it like this or like this, is because of the way this very dead center crop cuts off these clouds right here. So I'm going to jump back to this removal tool and see how it does, so this is the eraser, this is the remove tool. I'm pressing the right bracket to make my brush bigger, and I'm just gonna whoop. So sometimes it does really, really good on skies. Other times it does really, really bad. Sometimes it's just a really smooth removal and it's non-obvious that it's there. Other times it's wild banding, wild color shifts, even though it would. Other times it's just obvious. It's a gamble. And I'm pretty happy with the way that turned out. That image is harmonious. So one thing I'm going to do is come over here, create a snapshot. We'll just go with the date, 2026-01. And we'll just call it secondary color edit. And with these two snapshots, I can jump between the two edits. And the more I look at it, the more I like having this a little lower in the frame. So what that means is the tree is still centered. And I'm gonna come back to the remove tool, get rid of that removal. I'm gonna try this again because I do kind of like having this area blank. But I might just leave it as is because it does add for a nice little line of clouds. And let's see how it does. Not very good. It's added banding. It just didn't do a very good job. We can try turning generative AI off and see how it handles it. much better, but I still see some blotchiness right there. There are some ways around that. And I'll just show you for the sake of it, but ultimately I'm going to remove those. So I'm going to take this brush and I'm just going to brush in, keep the flow medium, brush in an area where I had that removal. Alrighty. Then I'll come down to effects, bring the clarity down, texture down. And that does help a little bit, but ultimately it did kind of turn this section of sky into mush, so I don't want that mask, and I don't want that removal. So I'm going to keep these clouds. If I go even higher with this, then I get all of them in there. I think that initial edit was even lower, like right there. I don't know, I'm very indecisive, so I'm just going to go with this for now and update that secondary edit. And then one thing I actually will remove is this black streak right there, because I have no idea what it is. Using the left bracket on the keyboard, I'm going to make it real small. Give myself some wiggle room. Boom. And remove. I swear. And then we will just go ahead and export that. Command-Shift-E on the keyboard. Second edit. And that's that photo. Thanks for coming along.